Welcome to That Entrepreneur Life, a podcast about entrepreneurship that takes you from idea to launch and beyond. Each week, your hosts, Andrew Lees and Clint McPherson, discuss different business topics aimed at adding value to any entrepreneur's journey.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of That Entrepreneur Life. I'm Andrew Lees. I'm here with my co-host, Clint McPherson. What's up, man?
Not much, brother. Just living an entrepreneurial life like always and juggling a million things at once like we talked about just a second ago offline. But with that said, let's go ahead and kick this thing off. I welcome our special guest, Claire Chandler, to the show.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, Claire, it's an honor to have you on the show today. But before we get into everything, and talk about your entrepreneurial journey, could you just take a second to introduce yourself and tell us what you're all about?
Sure. So I'm Claire Chandler. I'm the president and founder of Talent Boost, which I formed back in 2013 after surviving, I'll say, corporate America. Spent close to 20 years there. So formed my own business in 2013 and help leaders and their teams scale painlessly.
That's awesome. And with all that said, Claire, we've done a lot of research before we bringing you on the show. And I know you held a lot of different positions throughout your career, right? That have basically led you to where you are today. And as the founder and president of Talent Boost, can you take us from me and Andrew to all our listeners to when your entrepreneurial journey actually started and what it is about entrepreneurship as a whole that you're actually passionate about?
Oh, great starting question. So, like I said, I spent close to 20 years in corporate roles. After swearing, by the way, that there was no way I was going to go into corporate. I come from parents that did not work in corporate roles. My dad was a sole proprietor of his business until he retired. And so I never quite fit into the corporate box. And even though I had a very successful run in corporate, I always kind of felt out of place. I was a little bit too goofy. My walk was a little bit too happy. That was kind of the feedback that I would get, in my corporate roles. And I rose through the ranks over the years. I mean, I was a VP in human resources when I left. But there was something. There's a restlessness when you're an entrepreneur, or when there's an entrepreneur inside you, kind of trying to get out. And in 2011. I formed my company in 2013, but in 2011, I was VP of HR. I was traveling all the time. I was on the road a lot and, going 150 miles an hour. And it came to a screeching halt because I got diagnosed with cancer. And so, went from going a mile a minute to literally had to take 1 month off, no work, don't even look at, emails and stuff like that for a month. And it was in that quiet that that voice in my head finally caught up to me. And that it was the one that was asking, am I really on the road that I'm meant to be on? Am I really doing what I'm passionate about? And I finally had to confront that and say that the answer was no. And once I kind of, spoke that into the void, that opened up all sorts of other questions. Okay, well, if this is not the right path, what is the next leg of the journey, right? What are you passionate about? And I knew there were certain elements of what I was doing in HR that I loved, that drove me, that energized me, just not in the box that I was kind of being forced to play in. And so I really took a leap of faith. I finished up my cancer treatments. I'm completely cancer-free today. But did all the treatment recovery, came back into work and said, yeah, this isn't really for me. And so, I had spent close to 15 years in that company. And so we parted amicably. They were very supportive of my decision. And I just sort of, took that leap of faith. And I said, if I don't take my shot now, even though it wasn't fully formed yet, it took me 2 years to found Talent Boost. I kind of just walked through those first 2 years between 2011 and 2013, knowing what I didn't want to do and just trying to walk toward opportunities that I knew that I could do well, could contribute value to, but that I was going to be excited about doing. And so it really took 2 solid years to kind of form that into a niche that I could build a company around.
Right. To kind of find your voice and find your purpose and yeah. I mean, even if you could have, a lot of different skills, but figuring out how to package that up and put it into a product or a service can be kind of difficult. And I bet you pivoted along the way, right? Maybe
so many times.
Yeah.
Yeah. So many times.
Yeah, that happens. Well, with Talent Boost, you assist leaders and their teams in finding and fixing bottlenecks that are, choking their overall business performance. How challenging has it been to help these growing organizations align their leadership around and a unifying vision that attracts or retains the right talent to accomplish their mission successfully?
Yeah, it's a difficult challenge because, every leader, every founder, every head of a company wants to build a successful business. And they know in their heart that they have to do that through their people, not on the backs of their people, right? They have to do it through their people, but they don't always know how to do that. And especially as they grow, right? They're very. It's sort of like me. I'm a solopreneur, and I'm very, as you said, and as you observed, it took me 2 years to kind of figure out what I was going to be all about, like what my real core purpose and my offering to the world would be. And so when you're an entrepreneur and you found a company that ultimately you're going to bring people into to help you achieve your vision, it becomes a little bit difficult because you have to get that vision and that mission out of your own head. If you're only ever going to be a solopreneur, you can pivot every single day. You can innovate in different ways. You can change direction. But if you do that with people who are trying to follow along and contribute in meaningful and impactful ways, you have to give them a pretty steady course map to follow. And you've got to give them, as I refer to it, you got to use your turn signals, right? If you're going to make a course correction, you have to give people a heads up. You have to explain why. And so that it is a big challenge to get companies aligned. And it's why I start from the top of a company and work my way down. Because I truly believe the biggest impact on a company's culture is the behavior of its leaders. And they don't always realize how closely their people are watching, right? How closely they're watching, who gets advanced, what gets rewarded, what gets recognized. And they're going to repeat the behavior that gets rewarded, right? So you want that to be very intentional. You want to be very specific about the mission that you want to achieve, the vision you're trying to move toward, and what behaviors and kind of value system is going to keep you on the right path. So it's not for the faint of heart, but the leaders that I work with who are truly willing to kind of go all in, be a little bit vulnerable, and be open to kind of doing things a different way. The results that they can get through and with their people can be really, really amazing.
I mean, that's huge because at the end of the day, too, though, I think even from the top down, communication is key, right? And I think in large organizations, especially organizations that are growing, you typically got the lower level individual not really knowing what's going on outside and all the moving pieces, right? They're just worried about their job, coming in and doing it and getting out. But I think when you're from the top down and you break and you ultimately, because I was in the military, right? And so I kind of relate this to the military thing of nesting with hire, right? Nesting your purpose, knowing the purpose of the founder, of the president, of the CEO, whoever it is that's giving everybody, all your leaders, their tasks and duties, and then being tied in with that. So there's no confusion along the way. And so even the lower level individual feels empowered to a certain degree because, right, they feel like they're part of the team more. It's more unifying when you communicate all of that verbally to somebody and let them know you're just not here, whether you're building PowerPoints or whether you're building meeting notes for your boss, whatever it is, you're actually serving a purpose that's a little bit, more empowering than you actually think. And then you can actually, even at the lower level, be a leader by, seeking out more, asking, what else you can do and take on. And so I think communication is huge from the top down, and then from the bottom up. So.
Yeah. And there's two key things that resonate for me in what you just said. One, and first of all, thank you for your service. I'm married to a jarhead myself, so
Awesome.
hoorah and all that.
Yeah.
And we talk about it a lot, and I see this a lot in the workplace, that veterans who transition from military to civilian work, um, you guys very keenly understand and very keenly feel the importance of mission. And I personally think the reason that a lot of folks struggle transitioning from military to civilian is you're still looking for that connection to, what is the overall mission? How can we as a team achieve that? And a lot of companies struggle with, conveying that clear mission. So mission clarity to me is so foundational and so important. And it's usually the very first thing that I work on with leaders is getting that right. But the other piece is, I could not agree with you more that communication is absolutely important. But leaders tend to confuse communication with connection. And they're very, very different, right? I've had conversations with people who are like, well, of course, our employees know the mission. We communicate it out every day, and we've got posters on the wall with the mission statement and whatever. And it's like, but are you taking the time to go back and make sure that it's landing, that it's understood, that your people embrace it? And then that key point that you just, like they feel it, and they can see a very clear connection. And Clint, you just touched upon it, between what I do in my individual role and how that contributes to moving the needle. Whether it's making sure I capture accurate notes from that meeting, or I'm out there in, research and development, working on the next big breakthrough, or somewhere in between. Everybody has to see that connection. Otherwise, they are not going to contribute their full hands, heads, and hearts.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It goes beyond just, I think it really is that feeling that, and people, I bet you, I'm sure you've run into this, where leaders probably really drastically underestimate, the importance of, or they underestimate how much people really do look up to them and how much they really are following them. They probably think, oh, well, I'm not, even if and especially I bet for humble leaders, I bet that's even harder, right? Because they're like, well, I'm not super special. I'm just leading this company, and I'm trying to communicate the mission and to everybody, but they probably have a little bit of a difficult time realizing that, man, people are really paying attention and they're really hanging on every word or everything that they put out. So I'm sure that's a challenge for everybody to realize how impactful they are, but especially for people who are a little bit more reserved, a little more humble.
Yeah. That's a great point. I mean, I do get pushback from a lot of the more humble leaders, as you call them. And I don't mean pushback, but sort of resistance to this idea that they can inspire their people, right? Because they'll often say, I'm just not one of these charismatic leaders. I'm just not one of these, really, polished speakers. And I'm more introverted and reflective and, all of that. And all of that is important. Those are key skills to have. But, in my experience, anybody can inspire their people. You don't have to be the most charismatic. One of the things, my mantra when I founded Talent Boost was, talent isn't born, it's boosted. To kind of center on that very idea that just because you don't see yourself as charismatic, or no one else has ever regarded you as charismatic, doesn't mean you can't lead from the front, inspire, and bring along your people to amazing success. And the key is not becoming charismatic. It's becoming super, super self-aware, right? Of who you truly are, and then being authentic to who you are. That's what people follow. Because if you pretend to be charismatic, or if you look at leadership as a role that you play, your employees see right through that.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, for sure. So Claire, you have a quote, right? Money isn't made in the information, it's made in execution. Okay. Which we love, because execution is what moves the needle. We've touched on moving the needle a little bit already. With that being said, I believe it is super important to keep learning, right? And how do you know when
Absolutely.
you're knowledgeable enough about something to go ahead and start executing?
That's a great question. So right before we jumped on air, I used that phrase of, you had said, let's not wait for perfect. And I said, implement what's good enough and improve it as you move it. And I can't, again, I cannot take credit for that quote. Somebody said that to me years ago, but it's funny how certain phrases just kind of stick with you throughout the years. And, another spin on that others say is that, great is the enemy of good, right? If you're waiting for the perfect strategy, the perfect plan, the perfect combination of people on your team, while you're waiting for perfection or greatness to come to you, your competitors are miles down the road, right? And the other thing about being perfect, it's such a moving target. First of all, it's a myth. You can't get to perfection. You can get to greatness, right? But yeah, like so to directly answer your question in terms of when do you know it's ready to execute? Um, there's probably a percentage in there that somebody way brighter than me can throw out there that you put out the 70% solution or something. To me, it's when you can feel it in your heart and in your gut that we're on to something really solid here, and you've got the buy-in of your people that, hey, I know we don't have every single part of this totally nailed down, but we feel good about this. Let's put this into motion and let's put our best, shoulder to the wheel and move it forward. That's when it's time to jump in, or it's probably a week later you could have jumped in. But yeah, it's the buy-in, it's the commitment, it's the engagement of the people around you to a good enough plan, and continue to, you talked about learning, continue to learn, continue to evaluate, continue to course correct and bring your people along and make sure that they understand, the why behind your actions and your decisions.
Yeah. Yeah. We're always learning. So that never stops, but it's so interesting to figure out when, and I do this on a daily basis. Like if I'm trying to learn how to do something for my business, I will, learn as much as I can about it. And I'll sort of soak up all this information from blogs to videos to, whatever. And at some point for a while, it feels like, okay, this is the only way I'm going to get to the execution part. And then I definitely reach a point sometimes where I'm like, I think I've learned too much about this. Like I guess there's no too much, but I could have started I could have started like getting some traction on this, a while ago. So let's actually, get down to it. There's a guy who does free online marketing courses, and he's all about like consume my information, and of course that's what makes him money because he's an affiliate marketer basically. But he's like, but at some point start doing this stuff. Like don't just keep watching me all the time. Like do it. Watch it, soak it, understand it, then do it. Don't waste too much time. So
That's so, and it's so hard, especially, entrepreneurs. We have so many voices in our heads. I don't have an accurate count of how many I have. I don't know if you guys do, but, we get into that shiny object syndrome, for exactly that reason. Right. We're constantly looking to learn, and we're bombarded with emails and commercials and Facebook ads that I swear they're just listening to me, like just talk about something. And all of a sudden it's in my feed. Right. We could talk about that on another episode, but it's so hard to kind of filter, what comes through that information funnel. And I think, as entrepreneurs, it's sort of the same struggle as presidents and founders and, executive leaders. It can feel very isolating if you don't remember that you're not truly alone. And I run into this with CEOs all the time. They're like, I don't have anybody else on the team who can think at my strategic level, or, that I can bounce ideas off of. Or worse, they say, back to your, when is it ready to sort of implement and execute? They say, if I don't have a solid plan before I present it to my team, that's going to be a sign of weakness. If I admit I don't have all the answers, they're going to, lose confidence in me. And the opposite is true, because if you just stay in your little bubble and you try to generate something and then hope that your people get behind it, they're, people support what they help to create. They're not just going to jump on board because you think you've, created the next greatest thing. So it's okay to be vulnerable. You're kind of required to show some vulnerability. And it is the first, it's the greatest first step to getting input and insight and, challenge to your idea to bulletproof it, is by bringing in other voices.
Yeah, because it shows empowerment too. Like,
Absolutely.
I mean, like we mentioned before, it's like, if, as a leader, the founder of my company, if I just do things in a bubble and then say, ta-da, right? I mean, everybody's gonna be like, what's going on, dude? Like, no input from anybody else, just you did your thing and now you expect us to back it. That's not how this goes, right? So
think of the greatest bands that broke up, right?
Yeah,
it's because you had some one guy who thought he was the genius, and he wrote this one song while they were on a break and tried to jam it down the rest of the group's throat. And it's like, dude, that's not how it works. He
didn't get any input from the other creative geniuses that he had in his group, right? It's just it's crazy.
But he expects them to back him up on the piece, and it's like that's not really how we do things,
For sure. So empowerment is huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, at every level too. I mean, I think you can, if you feel like if you're at the lowest level of a company, and even if you're an intern and you feel like you can contribute something, and you feel empowered, I mean, you're going to want to stay. You're just going to want to stay forever, I mean, because you're like, wow, I'm with a group who understands me, who respects me, and I'm only an intern, or I'm kind of at the bottom of the totem pole here. That's huge. And that'll definitely fuel people's confidence and like, oh, okay, I can really make a difference. But if you keep kind of getting stomped on and your ideas are kind of always challenged, or like, that's nice, but we're going to go this other route. And it's like, yeah. Then it's like, okay, you know what? I might take my ideas and go somewhere else, or start my own thing, or
that's exactly right.
You might be
and that can happen at any level, right?
Yeah.
But the intern's a great example. But even, middle management, individual contributors, executives, if they don't feel like they're at least being heard and listened to, and their ideas are given serious consideration, even if you don't, jump on every idea they've got, they are going to take them somewhere else. They're going to stop innovating. I mean, that one of the other things that some of these CEOs will kind of say is, well, we can't just open the floodgates and ask for input from everybody, because that would be absolute chaos. And it's like drinking from a fire hose. And, what will we do with that? And the thing is, you've got to start with clarity, right? You've got to have a crystal clear mission that you can communicate consistently, and that you can show the connection between, where you want to go and how your people contribute to that. But once you have that, let the floodgates open. Because now you've got a much clearer idea around which to make decisions, right? So the clearer you are on what you're all about and where you're headed, now you can invite all sorts of ideas, and now you can, decide on them through the lens of, does this help advance us toward the mission? And if it doesn't, you've got a much more defensible, demonstrable way to go back to that employee and say, listen, keep those ideas coming. This is why this particular one is not one we're going to pursue. Right. And it just encourages them to try again.
To keep going. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's cool. So Claire, you wrote a book called The Whirlpool Effect. And where you talk about this whirlpool effect for business leadership. Can you explain what that's all about?
Yeah. So the whirlpool effect started out as a little bit of nostalgia. So I live in New Jersey. I grew up in New Jersey, and just like now, we're in late July. It's the height of the summer. Summers are very hot here. Where are you guys?
Mm-hmm. North Carolina.
Yeah.
I grew up outside of Philadelphia, so I know. All about the weather up there too.
Yeah. And so it always happened that the most popular kid on the street was the one with the swimming pool in the backyard, right? And so, for us, like in the summers, all the neighborhood kids would flock to, the yard with the pool. And at some point, invariably, one kid would say, let's make a whirlpool. And everybody just kind of automatically knew what that meant. They just, stop whatever they were doing. We would go around in a circle and follow each other. And after a couple of, rotations, you could pick up your feet and get swept along by the current. And I was writing this book, and that was not the original title. And I was kind of struggling with, a metaphor to kind of get help educate leaders on what leadership truly is all about. Because I know a lot of leaders who aspire to that role and they get there and they go, well, this really isn't as fun as I thought it would be. It's a lot harder than I thought. I don't understand why people aren't just getting totally behind me. Um, and so I kind of got into this metaphor of the whirlpool effect, because that's what leadership should look like. And again, and this is where you don't have to be charismatic right out of the gate. You can learn how to be inspiring. If you can come up with a leadership concept, a mission for your company, a purpose that people can get around, your equivalent of shouting whirlpool, where people can immediately see the connection to how they can contribute to forming that and how much fun it would be once you achieve that result. That's what leadership is supposed to be about.
Okay. And it also could be a little bit of a metaphor for put in the work now and then pick your feet up a little bit, and you kind of can carry your momentum a little bit. So, you can work really hard, and that's kind of like in business where you don't have to ever stop working. But the idea is that you put in all the work in the beginning. You work really, really hard. The harder you work, the more that whirlpool, goes around and really, yeah, exactly. Then you can pick your feet up, and the harder you work in the beginning is the longer you can go without having to work quite as hard. So, so really dig in and get something done. And then you can continue to, see the fruits of that going forward.
And people, and people are far more willing to put in that extra work, that hard work up front, when they can see what those tangible, successes are going to do for them. Because, as much as we talk about, we're all here in this, we're in this together, we're a family, all of that sort of thing. At the end of the day, every single employee wants to know what's in it for them. How are they going to benefit? Right.
And that, I've heard that thing before where, a leader will say, or the owner of a business will say, we're a family. They're trying to build this real family environment. And that's nice, but it doesn't connect the dots of, like you said, how are the employees actually really helped? Maybe there's some fringe benefits that they get, but at some point those fringe benefits sort of wear off and you're like, show me the money, or give me the responsibility. Yeah. Empower me to actually, advance my career and do more work and earn more money, or whatever it is. That family effect is nice, but it's it's really not what holds people together.
No. And you talked about the sort of the fringe benefits. There's this employee study that's done every year. It's been done for decades around, what kind of drives engagement. And everybody always thinks it's, higher wages, better benefits. Those are important, but the top two are always feeling in on things, right? So feeling included in decisions and being recognized for the contributions that you make. If you get those two things right, then the rest of it, it doesn't mean you can pay them pennies and hope that they stay. Obviously, those things are still important. But to your point, the high of being paid, market competitive wages wears off if I don't feel like I'm heard, I'm understood, I'm embraced for my uniqueness and the way that I contribute.
Recognition is huge, and that's what leaders need to understand. I mean, there comes a time where it's like, show me the money for people. But then some people don't even care about showing me the money. They just want to be recognized. And you don't know how far as a leader that goes to some people and how impactful that is and how touching that can make their week, their month, their day. There's so many people, especially from my side of the military. I know there's 18 to 22 military individuals that commit suicide on a daily basis, right? The study. So we average that out to 20. And it's like, if you just take a day, right? I was a platoon leader, and it was one of those things. It's like, you just take a second and recognize somebody for what they're doing. It could get them out of their own headspace, no matter if they're going through divorce, relationship trouble, having a hard time with a family member, cancer, like you, being a cancer survivor and all that. So, I mean, a lot of that stuff, nobody, if you don't have a relationship and you don't recognize people and take that little bit of time to actually know them as an individual, know that they have two kids, one of them might have a handicap, right? That requires additional attention, and they're struggling with trying to figure this out because it's a newborn, right? And so there's so many things that people deal with just with life. And if as a leader, we need to understand and know how important it is to recognize people for what they do, the value they bring into your organization, and actually what they go through on a regular basis outside of work. Because if you get to know them on that personal level, I mean, I'm not saying, hey, you're going to go and go to the park with them and all this crazy stuff, but it's like just knowing, how's your wife Susan doing, right? Or how's your two kids? How's your boy doing? I know you're struggling, and just letting them vent a little bit goes a long ways as well. I know soldiers, anytime I would ask them that, if they told me and came to me with some kind of burden and they would just verbalize it, you can see the stress and the relief. You can see the boulder just roll off their back, right? And it's just, as leaders, I mean, I just challenge us all to listen, recognize, and again, empower.
Yeah. Amen to that. I mean, you used relationship a couple times, and it's so key. You have to look at your people as humans first, employees second. Because yes, you've hired them, you're paying them to do a certain job, and you need to get value out of that investment. And no one's disputing that. But if you only ever, look at them as cogs in the wheel, or treat them as assets that you deposit and withdraw from, that's what they're going to feel like. They're going to feel like a commodity, not as somebody that you're empowering and entrusting and, kind of embracing to bring their very best.
For sure. So Claire, through your entrepreneurial journey and everything you've been through, from the highs to the lows, what has been the most difficult thing for you being an entrepreneur to date?
I would have to say those first 2 years. So between leaving the corporate cocoon, such as it was in 2011, and really finding my groove and finding my voice, in 2013. Part of I think it's a pretty common characteristic of us entrepreneurs that yes, we are control freaks. Yes, we have multiple voices in our heads, but we're also pretty stubborn. I say that to say that while my company that I left was very supportive, there were some people that pulled me aside and said, "Are you out of your mind? Like, what are you doing leaving, this kind of comfortable corporate role? Do you have a plan?" "No, not really." "Do you have like clients lined up?" "No, I figure I'll get those eventually." It was more of a gut feel that was pulling me towards something, not running me out of where I was. But I think the biggest stumbling block, the biggest mistake that I made, kind of looking back, and I advise a lot of entrepreneurs who come to me and say, you've been doing this, you left corporate now 9 years ago, you've had your own company for 7 years, you kind of like bucked the trend of, the failure rates of some of these companies. What's your secret? And I would love to be able to say, well, I did everything right. Let me tell you, I had a business plan. And I didn't have any of that. And so I tell them, do what I did not do. And the first thing I should have done much earlier was invest in a business coach. I have one now. He's a great, mentor, has become a very close friend of mine, and has helped me to pivot as I continue to evolve my business and, my own voice and my, kind of my core offerings. But, in the beginning, because we are control freaks and we think we're supposed to do everything ourselves until we've reached, this sort of plateau of enough success that we can reinvest it and hire some other people and offload things. That was the biggest mistake I made, that, I didn't make that upfront investment to say, I don't know everything. I know next to nothing about how to build a consulting business. And, I need guidance. I need a sounding board. I need somebody who can challenge me, help me see my forest, and see my way through it. So I would say it was not a low point. It was more of a, kind of a scattershot approach to consulting for those first 2 years. until I sort of established my niche. So, I would say that to anybody on their journey. You don't have to spend, all of your life savings on a coach. Find the right coach, establish the right relationship, and, do it in a way that works for you. But that investment is going to pay off big time.
Well, you also allowed yourself to find yourself, right? You allowed yourself that time to evolve, right? Because again, I mean, you start one place along a journey doesn't mean you're going to stay there. If you're going to stay there, you're not going anywhere, right? So you got to allow yourself that freedom to, again, when you're in the corporate world, you're in it's almost like a bubble, right? Especially when you go, just take life as example, right? You're born, you start crawling, you start walking, and then now you're going to school, and then you're going from, daycare to elementary school to middle school to high school to college, on a traditional path. Some people don't go to college, but then you go to college, and then now you got the degree. Now you're going to corporate, right? I mean, and it's like you stay in this bubble that is just like, and it doesn't allow you to really veer off too much outside of if you have a hobby or whatever. But I really think as an entrepreneur, when you take that step, I think really finding what, and I've said this before, finding what makes you happy, finding something that you're passionate about, finding you as a person, being happy with yourself, and then understanding, the value that you add to whatever niche you found yourself in, and then allowing yourself, again, you might not know everything. You might just have found yourself in this position, but you let yourself get educated. You let yourself evolve. You find the business coach or a mentor that you can just, they can help you, right? You might have you're standing at the edge of the forest, right? But you need somebody to open it up for you so you can really go deep into the forest without getting lost.
Absolutely. Because that forest is dark. It's dense. Sure. There's a lot of trees. There might be some critters in there you really don't want to run up against. So having that kind of guide who's either been there or has enough detachment from, where you're sitting right now to help you, kind of referee all those thoughts in your head, because they're multiple. I had a very close friend of mine who was a coworker back in corporate. Before I left, she had been talking about she was like an administrative assistant, and she was very good at it, but that was not her passion. And she said, my passion is to open up a yoga studio. I love yoga. Like I'm very into all of that. And she said, I just don't have enough money saved. About a year after I left, she called me and she said, I just got fired. What do I do? And I said, okay, that's the universe kind of giving you the kick in the pants to go out and do your thing. And so she just sort of, got past that emotional, okay, I knew eventually I was going to leave there. I didn't get to leave on my own terms. You got to make your peace with that, and now put that behind you and accept that the universe just opened up to you to go and take your lead.
Gave you an opportunity. Yeah. And it might not be, when you really get into it and you start working hard at whatever it is, you might realize that it's actually not quite as scary as you thought.
Right.
Still scary. But
it's still right. And to your point earlier about, sometimes there's even harder work up front. She had to work very hard. She found a partner that she could kind of go in, as sort of a joint partnership to open up a studio. She's now the owner of her own studio. And she called me like about a year in, and she said, you gave me such great advice. I said, what did I tell you? She said, do what you love and the money will follow. I said that? I said, that sounds like way wiser than anything I would say. She said, you said that, it stuck with me, and you're totally right. I'm doing what I love. I'm making a living at it. And I couldn't be happier. So it was cool to get that reflected back.
That's so cool. Yeah. So if you did it again, would you leave the corporate world complete, or would you leave your full-time job completely? Or would you have maybe started it, kind of phased into it? What do you think?
I absolutely would have done it the same way. I would have left at the same time that I did. I probably would have put a little bit more elbow grease into at least roughing out a plan,
right.
Rather than really just sort of leaving it up to God. And although he's done great with helping me on that, don't get me wrong. But he was probably like, Claire, you could have met me halfway and maybe just at least drafted an outline.
Right. Yeah, a little bulleted list would have helped.
Yeah, exactly. So no, I would not have left any later or in any different of a way. And it was, and the reason I knew that I had made the right decision, I left, like I said, I was with that company close to 15 years, and I left on a Friday in mid-October, and I'm driving away, from the office for the last time. And I burst into tears and it wasn't out of regret. Oh my gosh, did I make the right decision? It was because all the people that I had, built these relationships with, that I was going to miss seeing every day and working with and whatever. And the following Monday, was the first day of my new chapter and all that. And I woke up and my second eye wasn't even open yet. And I was just grinning from ear to ear. And I knew that this was the right decision. Again, didn't have a roadmap to follow. I didn't have a plan. I just knew there were kind of two columns, right? I knew what I loved doing, and I knew what I didn't want to have to do anymore. And that became sort of my measuring stick for what I went after.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I think that's super helpful. So Claire, as I think we could talk to you for a while here. This is awesome. We love talking to you. But as we wrap up this episode, what is one piece of advice or tip that you could leave our audience that would really help them on their entrepreneurial journey?
I would say it's the same piece of advice that I would give even the CEO of a multinational company, which is don't forget that you're not alone. Yes, you are the captain of the ship, the leader of your own destiny and all of that. But it doesn't mean that you have to figure out everything on your own, that you have to do everything by yourself to prove to yourself or to anybody else. Just because you're an entrepreneur doesn't mean you're on an island. Just because you're a CEO and you don't feel like, you can acknowledge certain things within your team doesn't mean there aren't people in your extended network, or just around you who can be a sounding board, make connections for you, point out things that are, potential blind spots for you. So that's probably the biggest piece of advice. And my second one, if I can just offer a second one, is if your gut is pulling you toward entrepreneurship and, you are not content where you are, life is too short to wait for the perfect opportunity or the perfect plan. Take the leap and go for it.
Yeah, you don't want to find yourself in a retirement home with regret, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, I've watched Gary Vaynerchuk so many times say, the biggest thing that he's taken time out of his day to go to these retirement homes and listen. And he says, and what, the one common thing is the what ifs. What if I would have done this? What if I would have done this? What if I would have listened to my heart and actually acted on it instead of just letting it go by? And you don't want to, if you have that calling as an entrepreneur and you just let it go, you're going to find yourself in that position. And that the what if is going to kill you. It's going to eat up you.
That's absolutely right. So true.
Yeah, that's my biggest fear, and also driving motivation to be an entrepreneur. My biggest fear is to, be 60, 70 years old and be like, I should have done something. I should have, followed my passion, tried to start something, tried to build something, because I have a product development business, and, I talk to people they've waited, like they may have come up with an idea 20 years ago and, they wait till now. I mean, sometimes you can't always just dive right in and execute on your idea. But usually you don't need to wait that long. Usually you can kind of figure out a way to work through it. And so, I just think it's never too late to start something. That's for sure. I truly believe that. But like, I can't imagine, having gone the corporate route or, kind of playing it safe with a job and waking up at 60 or 70 and just thinking, man, it could have been so much more interesting. It could have been so much different. It could have been so much better, So
you have to fight against walking through life in an automated way. And I don't mean don't find automations. That's a different topic, but there's so many things that we just get up every day and we go, okay, I'm going to get up. I'm going to have breakfast at this time. I'm going to make coffee. I'm going to go through my routine. I'm going to go to the corporate office that I hate. I'm going to ignore that churn in my stomach, which is my gut telling me I'm heading in the wrong direction. and I'm just going to do that until I get my retirement papers. And you're absolutely right. The biggest regret at the end of the journey is those two words, what if. The biggest barrier to entrepreneurship before you start are two other words, which is if only. And it's if only I had more experience, if only I had more money saved, if only I had a plan worked out, if only I had, more experience, better contacts, more clients lined up. You need to listen to those if onlys in your head. You're going to blink. And that's where I was when back in 2011, I'm like, if only I had this or that, or didn't have that other thing. And I just decided to F the if. And I said, I'm going to just take this journey, because if I blink, it's going to be 10 years down the road. And I'm going to be exactly what you're talking about and saying, I missed my shot.
Yeah. Like, what did I do? What happened the last 10 years,
Right.
And yeah, I like that. F the if. You got.
I'm trying to keep it clean. I don't know how your audience is.
Yeah. Either way, that's good. But I like that. We get a couple of great lines out of it. Yeah, definitely. F the if. That's cool.
Well, guys, I think that's a wrap for this episode. And from the both of us, Claire, we just want to thank you from the bottom of our heart for taking the time out of your day to help us add value to what we're trying to do on our podcast.
It was an absolute pleasure. I appreciate you guys having me on.
Yeah, thank you very much, Claire. Well, guys, thank you so much for listening to That Entrepreneur Life. To learn more about what Claire is working on, check out clairechandler.net. If you like what you heard today, make sure to subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or any other major podcast directory. You can also find us on all the socials and on our website at thatentrepreneurlife.com. And with that said, we also want to quickly give a special shout out to our family and friends, like always, to include all of our followers, our listeners, and subscribers. If you find value in our show, guys, please consider making a small donation. Even just a few dollars helps us keep things moving along and helps bring value to your entrepreneurial journey. Thanks for continuing to support what we do as entrepreneurs, guys. And don't forget to join us next week for another episode of That Entrepreneur Life.
Thanks for listening to That Entrepreneur Life podcast. Be sure to visit thatentrepreneurlife.com to join the conversation, access our show notes, and discover our fantastic bonus content. Don't forget to join us next week for another episode as we continue to add value. Until next time.